time gives us options but demands urgency. So when we're sitting here planning things out, or we're doing 8 million different projects, or we're determining, do we want to do this or do that, time gives us the option, right? Time says, hey, you have a day, you have a month, you have a week, you have a year, theoretically, to go do these things. So we oftentimes get distracted with all these things, get distracted with 5 different business strategies versus just one. We get distracted with all these things that pull us away from family or pull us away from things in business that give us energy. And the other part of that, though, is that time also demands urgency. A few years back, I talked about a book that changed my life. In this episode of the Trevor Truck Talks, it's going to be a pretty darn tough topic, y'all. I'm going to make this one probably kind of short to let you know what's on my mind. And then I'm going to follow up with some other deeper topics on my learnings during this process. But a few years ago, I read a book, and it landed on my doorstep. I didn't order it. I didn't know who ordered it. It didn't have a note on it. And it was one of the most impactful books in my life. And I've shared that with carrot campers. I've shared it with many other people, and they've said the same thing. Man, how impactful was this to give context and perspective on life? I didn't know, y'all, how impactful that book would be until probably about 3 weeks ago. Okay. So this book is called Chasing Daylight. And Chasing Daylight was written by the former CEO of KPMG, multi-billion-dollar, one of the biggest accounting firms in the world. And he was diagnosed with a really aggressive form of brain cancer. It was incurable. He wasn't able to have surgery. His treatments weren't working. And if I remember right, from the time of diagnosis to the time he passed away, it was about 4 months. And I read the book from the perspective of time, right? I read the book from the perspective of, man, here's a hard-charging business guy. Here's in his final months, here's how he processed life. And it made a lot of sense because it really helped me to distill down to really what's important from a high-achieved guy, right? Now I'm going to kind of rip the Band-Aid off here on why it's so hard for me. And I just wrapped up a carrot camp last week, which was highly emotional. So transformational, though. Hearing already so many amazing comments from people saying they go to real estate events all of the time. These are big people doing 6, 7 figures. And they're like, man, I've been to 5, 10, 15, 20 real estate events. This is the best one I've ever been to. And part of it's because of the emotion, because we try to really focus on what's important. And 2 weeks ago, the week before carrot camp, my father got a same diagnosis. Man, I'm probably going to break up during this podcast, but strong guy. He's my Superman. He's always the guy that is the hardest worker I know. He's where I get my positivity. So grateful. He's where I get my optimism. Played baseball for the A's and the Mariners back in the day. He's built a couple companies from the ground up based on necessity. He had to start companies when we were younger. We had no money, and him and my mom just bootstrapped businesses up there. Now 30 plus years later, they still have these businesses, and they're amazing, still running without them for the most part. And one day I get a phone call from my mom, and I'm on a webinar at that time. So I'm like, oh, my mom calls normally, and I'll just call her back after that. Then I get 2 phone calls from my younger brother. And I go, there's something happening here. So get off of that webinar, and they rushed my dad to the hospital. He had a seizure. They just got back from a big long trip. Not a big long trip, but a trip camping. And they had their brand new motorhome, took it out on their first trip. He's been looking for this motorhome for months. This ideal motorhome to go and travel the United States with my mom now that he's finally retired. None of us thought he'd ever retire. And get a call that 10 minutes after getting home from that trip and being on the road, driving this motorhome, he had a seizure. They rushed him to the hospital, do a brain scan, and they found 2 tumors in his brain. And none of us knew what that was, right? There's multiple types of brain cancer, but I can tell you I've learned more about brain cancer in this last 2 weeks than I ever had in the whole previous 40 years of my life. Unfortunately, I've learned that much in this last 2 weeks. Anyway, they life flighted him up to Bend, Oregon, a couple hours away. He was stable. He's fine then at that point. They did tons of tests and discovered it was something called grade 4 glioblastoma, which if you're to Google that, y'all, it's not good. It's not good. It's the survival rates are very, very, very low. There is no curing it, so you can't really go into remission with this. The tumors are recurrent, so it keeps growing back. Wild thing is we have 2 friends in Klamath Falls where I grew up and where my parents live who also have it. One of them was my best friend growing up, his dad. And he's 4 years into his journey, which is massively bucking the trend. The average person with this lives max 12 to 18 months after diagnosis, some of them 3 months. And reason I'm telling you about this, y'all, is for several reasons. At Carrot Camp, number one, I have a slide up there, and it really hit home this time that really talks about urgency, right? Time gives us options, but demands urgency. So when we're sitting here planning things out, or we're doing 8 million different projects, or we're determining, do we want to do this or do that? Time gives us the option, right? Time says, hey, you have a day, you have a month, you have a week, you have a year, theoretically, to go do these things. So we oftentimes get distracted with all these things, get distracted with 5 different business strategies versus just one. We get distracted with all these things that pull us away from family or pull us away from things in business that give us energy. And the other part of that, though, is that time also demands urgency. Because in moments like this, we were getting ready to, we have just planned some amazing trips and some life moments together. And we're still going to try to squeeze one in this Friday. There's an amazing classic car collection in Salem, Oregon that's kind of underground. It's hidden, but it's one of the biggest personal classic car collections in the world. Over 600 fully restored, pristine condition classic cars. And that's my dad's passion. Growing up, that's always what he's been so passionate about, is classic cars. He loves it. Classic cars, sport, baseball, and family. And so we got a private invite to this. You can only get in there from a private invite. It was 2 weeks before his diagnosis and seizure. We were pumped about it. They were getting ready to go on a big trip with some friends to the southeast, to go to Nashville to visit my younger brother. We have a New Orleans trip coming up planned in February. And it's pretty wild, y'all, right? Time demands urgency. In a moment, all of those plans change. In one moment, all those plans change. In one moment, everything became more clear, right? Where I should be spending my time, where my dad and mom and brothers should be spending their time. Because time gives us options when we have it, but it demands urgency because we don't know if we'll actually get it, right? Time gives us options when we have it, but it demands urgency because we're not guaranteed to get it. And so over the coming weeks, I'm going to be doing some podcast episodes. They're going to be a little bit different than my norm. I talk about serious topics on here. I talk about things that motivate you. I talk about things that get you to focus on what's important. And I talk about marketing things and market things. What I'm going to be talking about over the coming weeks, or what are my learnings and my dad's biggest learnings as we process this massive, massive hit over the coming weeks. And I'm going to be raw. I'm going to be vulnerable. These episodes aren't going to be fun for me, but I'm hoping that these episodes are valuable for you and there's something that you can take away to add urgency to your life, but also to focus in on the areas of business that are exactly what you want to be doing and to not be wasting and squandering that time, right? To be spending the right times on those 6 F's that I call. You've got faith, family, fitness, friends, fun, and finances. Okay, how do we best balance where those are going to be and where we should be putting that time? And so I'm going to be talking over these coming weeks how I'm processing this, the learning lessons I'm going to be taking back from that book again, Chasing Daylight, because that book, he processes how he wished he would have adjusted a couple things he was living in, how he was living in life and how he was running a business. He didn't have a whole lot of regrets, which is great. I don't either. My dad doesn't either. There's not a whole lot of regrets because we have focused on so much quality time together, especially this past year or two. Man, I want more time with him, that's for sure. I would love more time with him, more than anything. I'd take every single dollar that I have today in one instant, literally all the money I've worked for my entire career. I'd take every single dollar that I made. I'd sell my truck. I'd sell every possession I had and go live in a tent if I had to, then try to build it all back up just to get back to where we were 3 weeks ago. I would take every dollar I have and give it to whoever I would need to just to get back to where we were 3 weeks ago, where there was he had cancer, but we didn't know he had cancer, right? To get to that spot where we have a dad who's going to be around for decades, who can have an amazing experience. My kids can get to know them even more as they grow. I'd trade every dollar there, guys. So, as you're thinking about your life and what's important, kind of ask yourself that question. If X were to happen, if X changed to a person in my life, to you, to your spouse, to a child, to a parent, to a friend, if X were to change and something were to happen to this person, what would I trade right now for more time with that person? What would I trade? And if what you would trade is money, if what you would trade is time, guys, make that trade now while you can. Make the trade now before you're forced with even thinking about that scenario. And like I said, I thought about that years and years and years and years ago. And so I've been very, very intentional with my parents, with my family, to be spending lots and lots of quality time with them. That's why I focus on buying back time. That's why I focus on building a business that can give me freedom and help me make an impact. That's why my business is supporting me during this time versus me supporting it. My businesses and the people who are leading those companies are hitting me up and saying, Trevor, how can we support you? Trevor, we might need you in a couple areas here, but get rid of 90% of your work, 95% of your work. We've got this. And that right there is such an amazing example of why I talk about building a business of freedom and impact, because you never know when you're going to need it, let alone want it. Okay, you're going to want it so you can go out there and do what you want to do. But who knows when you're going to need it? When you need it is when it changes the game in a big way. Because imagine if I didn't have that and I had to pull away from my business, or I couldn't pull away from my business and spend all this time with my family. I've been with my parents over the last 2 weeks for probably 80% of the time, because I've been able to pull away from the business. I plug in for a few hours a week, and I'm going to be plugging in even more. But it's important, y'all. So I'm going to wrap this podcast episode with this. Okay. I want you to pull away from this and treat it seriously. You grab a piece of paper or just sit there in thought or prayer and ask yourself, if this person or this thing in my life were to change that's really important to you in such a drastic way that you don't want to lose, what would you trade today to get that time back? Okay. Would you trade time? Would you trade money? What would you trade? And then ask yourself, why don't I do this now? Okay. While I can trade that. If you would trade every dollar that you have to be able to spend more time with your spouse or more time with your mom or your dad, and you're only visiting your mom or dad 5 times a year, right now, bump it up, triple that. Visit them 15 times a year. If you're visiting them once a month, visit them 4 times a month. Okay. Write that down and ask yourself, what would I trade? And what do you have to do right now to be able to buy back that time, get some time back, hire the right person, go get an assistant, hire a yard person to do your yard, whatever it is, buy back that time so you can now go spend the time with the people that you love. All right, guys. So pray for my dad. His name is Harry. Pray for my dad. Pray for my mom. Her name is Carol. And I'm going to be kind of documenting part of this journey and sharing with you the insights I have on not just this journey that we're having with my dad, but also the insights on how I've adjusted things in my business and life over the years to be able to make this possible, where I can support my family, where I can be with my parents, where I can help them tie up the loose ends on their business right now, because they have businesses and they didn't tie up all these loose ends. So I'm helping them with those things. All right, guys. So I appreciate you big time. I know this is a more somber episode, but I've had people hit me up on Instagram who usually follow me, and they're saying, hey, Trevor, I haven't seen you post a whole lot lately. So this is kind of my first public acknowledgement of what we're going through and why you haven't seen me posting a whole lot lately, because I've been with my parents a ton, haven't been in that, mood to really just go out there and shout to the rooftops on all this positivity stuff. I've had a couple of weeks to process it and talk to lots of friends and pray. And you're going to be seeing some more content from me, which I'm excited about. And you're going to be hearing once again how I'm processing this, but also what I hope that you can learn from this so you can make the adjustments now before any of these big life changes happen in your own life too. All right, guys, we had an amazing Carrot Camp, like I said. If you guys want to join the next Carrot Camp, go to carrotcamp.com. Guys, that's where the transformation happens. You would not believe the messages I got from A-player investors and agents who are at this Carrot Camp, who've been to tons of events, who even run masterminds themselves, and literally say, this was transformational. I'm coming back changed. And that's what our focus is, y'all. So I almost canceled the event because of what we're going through, but I said, you know what? I've got the time. Let me pull away for these 2 days, and I'm going to go deliver an amazing experience, because I think that what I'm going through can help others transform in their lives too. So, all right, guys, I'm going to go say hi to the sheep at home. So if you don't follow me on Instagram, go follow me. You get to see our sheep, or my son's sheep. You get to see our little dog, our beautiful property, amazing kids. And also I teach all kinds of things that I'm learning in business as I grow. Follow me, trevor.mauch, M-A-U-C-H. I'll see you over there, y'all. All right, guys, check out the next episode where I'm going to be diving deeper into some of these principles and concepts on how I've built the business to allow this freedom, but also what I'm processing in this time of challenge. Love y'all.